With the release of the Galaxy Watch 4, I believe this is finally Samsung's and Google's real attempt to compete with the dominating wearable platforms like Apple Watch, Fitbit, and even Garmin. In my opinion, Samsung's Galaxy Watch 4 is quite literally the best Wear OS watch currently on the market thanks to its huge advancements in its hardware and software. But unfortunately, there are a few things that prevent me from ending my search for the perfect wearable device. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's go over why the Galaxy Watch 4 marks the beginning of Google's serious attempt to dominate the wearable market. Let's talk about performance. I have to say right off the bat, the UI is super smooth and it has a lot of slick animations. This is all thanks to Samsung's Exynos W920 5nm architecture, which actually is a lot better than Qualcomm's 4100 CPU chip in terms of battery efficiency and raw CPU performance. One of the key aspects of Samsung's chip is that it has dedicated low power processor cores, which means that you can always have an always on display. It can handle heart rate and notifications more easily in the background without, sucking up all the battery. Now, unfortunately, the rumors about the new Qualcomm 5100 don't look very good. It looks like it's not going to be a big upgrade over 4100 in terms of raw CPU performance, but it might introduce some of those low power processor CPU cores. Now back on the main topic, One UI and Wear OS 3.0. This is the big grand release, right? Well, to be honest, it's very hard to differentiate what exactly is Samsung's One UI versus what is actually going to be in your vanilla Wear OS 3.0 watch. Now, I'm hoping most of it is going to be Wear OS 3.0, but honestly, I don't think that's true because the new UI is super slick and it even competes with Apple's watch in terms of its UI. One thing I really like about it is that there's so much customization in the UI. Just have a look at all the notification settings you have at your disposal, and you even have the ability to modify the quick commands menu when you swipe down, which is something I could bet that it's probably from One UI and not Wear OS. One thing that I really liked about Wear OS 2.0 that got lost with the new upgrade is gestures. Now, yes, of course, you can use those weird gestures to answer or dismiss a phone call. But I'm talking about gestures where you could flick your wrist in order to replicate a swipe up or swipe down with your notifications. Since Tizen OS is a little bit different, of course, Samsung's notifications are more side to side, left to right. You don't have that gesture anymore, and that's something that is really nice, especially in these times where we don't want to be touching our watch all the time, and we'd rather use a gesture to glance at notifications. So as you already know, there are 4 different versions of the Galaxy Watch 4. You have the classic, and then you have just the regular one. I would like to call it the active, sleeker one. And for each version, you're going to have 2 sizes, the 40 and 44 millimeter. Now, personally for myself, deciding between the active or the classic was an easy choice. As much as I love that mechanical bezel, which makes it very easy to kind of navigate the UI, and it acts as a really cool fidget spinner, I just found that it was too clunky and I didn't really like the design of the classic. It was a little bit too thick and chunky, especially compared to the Active 4. Now, the Active 4 is mind-bogglingly thin. This is one of the thinnest or probably the lightest Wear OS watch I've ever tried in my life. So I absolutely love the design of the Active. Now for your next purchasing decision, you have to choose between the larger 44 millimeter one or just the regular 40 millimeter version. Now, typically I always choose the smaller watch because I really want a smaller footprint on my wrist. If I'm going to be wearing this 24/7, I'm going to be sleeping with it, going to doing active sports. You don't want to get all sweaty. You don't want this big thing on your wrist, this hockey puck. So it's really nice to have something that is really small. And I always get the smaller version, even in Garmin watches. If you watch my Garmin video of the Venue 2S, I get the smaller one. Now, a lot of people complain, it looks too small on your wrist or it looks more feminine. But honestly, I love the smaller version. But in this case, I did get the bigger version. And I think it all has to do with the battery. Now, yes, of course, this is an AMOLED display. And, if you have a bigger display, you're going to need a bigger battery to compensate for it. However, if you turn off always on display, you technically will have more battery life because you have a bigger capacity in the larger version. So yes, it does cost more. You get a bigger screen. But that's not the point. I think you're going to get a better battery life. Even at 44 millimeters on your wrist, because it's so thin, it's still such a small footprint on your wrist. So what I decided was to get the regular version or the active version and get the 44 millimeter for those reasons as stated. By the way, I really love the look of the red accent on the top button. It just looks really sleek overall. Also, the haptic feedback feels ultra luxurious, similar to Apple's Force Touch. Now, one quick thing I want to say about the silicone band design is that it's actually quite nice. What's different from other watches is that it kind of the excess strap tucks underneath the wrist strap, so it kind of is hidden. And what helps with this is that you don't have that excess flap, that excess wrist strap kind of bothering, dangling. Sometimes it gets loose. So it's a really cool design, and overall it does feel very nice on the wrist as you wear 24/7. So no matter what version you pick, either the classic or the active version, if you get the larger version of the two, you're going to get a nice 361 milliamp battery capacity, which is going to be 40% bigger than the smaller version. So if your screen is off most of the time and you have enabled 24/7 heart rate tracking and SpO2 tracking and all those sensors, you're technically going to have a longer battery life with that watch. Of course, if you use the screen a lot, it's probably going to be negated and you're going to get the same kind of battery life of the smaller version. So speaking about battery life, I think this is a very important topic, and it's maybe one of the downsides of the Galaxy Watch 4, especially when compared to the TicWatch Pro 3, which I absolutely love. And we'll talk about reasons why the battery life on that watch is so much better than the Galaxy Watch 4. Now, I want to mention a personal pet peeve when it comes to battery specs in a lot of these companies that when they announce it. Let's say Samsung claims up to 40 hours of battery life on their marketing page. The thing that annoys me is that they don't provide how exactly they evaluated that battery life. Does that benchmark mean up to 40 hours with no always on display enabled, no continuous heart rate tracking, and no nightly blood oxygen saturation tracking as well? Well, based on my usage, if you disable always on display but still have continuous tracking settings enabled, you can squeeze about 2 nights of sleep tracking. But this is based on minimal usage, meaning not downloading a ton of apps, not getting a million notifications. Overall, despite how efficient their 5nm CPU processor is, it's still nowhere near the multi-day battery life you typically get from a Garmin or a Fitbit, which perform better than the Galaxy Watch even with always on display enabled. And yes, I know it's unfair to compare a smartwatch against a fitness tracker, since a smartwatch does so much more, like have a speaker and OLED display. But I think having to always charge the device every day or every other day makes the whole experience of wearing a watch more of a chore than a value add to your life. And one thing I wanted to comment about the wireless charging. Yes, finally, I love wireless charging. I hate how all the other Wear OS watches like Fossil and TicWatch use that magnetic pin, which can be very annoying, especially because if you want to, replace it or have two, it can be very costly. Using a standard Qi wireless charger, you can use any type of charger you want in case you lose the one that you get from Samsung. But the only caveat I have with that is charging your Galaxy Watch 4 does take a lot longer than typically what I would expect. So that is kind of annoying, especially when you have to constantly charge the watch, and you want to be wearing this 24/7. You don't want to have some downtime. Maybe you put the watch down for 2 hours to charge, and then you just simply forget to put it on, and you just use your watch less and less because it's such a cumbersome task to take it off and then remember to put it back on your wrist. And overall, as a consumer, you kind of just have more distaste to using these types of watches as compared to, say, Garmin or Fitbit, where you can wear them for 7 days. The whole experience is just a lot better with those types of watches, in my opinion. So let's talk about apps or the Google Play Store. Now, the benefit of no longer being on Tizen OS is that you can finally download some high-quality third-party apps from the Google Play Store onto Wear OS. Now, the new Google Maps is one of the most notable new updates that have come from Google, and I have to say this new Google Maps is very slick. One of the things I really like is that you can finally set turn-by-turn directions, and I think this is what we should have had from the beginning when Wear OS was introduced. Now, unfortunately, not all apps are supported yet. There are some that need to be updated from the developer, so just be wary of that. So my favorite apps on Wear OS is Google Keep and StowCard. And in case you don't know, StowCard is a really cool app where you can load all your discount loyalty cards, all those, gym memberships and stuff like that, onto your Wear OS device so that you don't have to carry a wallet with you when you go to the gym, or if you want to scan any type of barcode like loyalty points. Now, what's really cool is that Samsung has actually added some value through their own apps. The first one I want to talk about is the Calendar or Agenda app, and I have to say it's fantastic. You can see all your events coming up, and most importantly, if you have multiple Google Calendar events, such as your personal account and your work account, they all can be synced to your Galaxy Watch 4. Now, one of my favorite Samsung apps is the Weather app, and this one is way better than the default Wear OS 2.0 app, the new Weather app that recently came out. I made a whole video review complaining about the Wear OS default Weather app, which totally sucks because you can't even see more than 12 hours of the next weather. You can't see, like, for example, the 7-day forecasts and things like your sunrise, sunset, and all those cool little informations that you would typically get in a very good weather app. So to summarize, Samsung's weather app is top notch, and I really like the interface. As for complications, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Samsung has created quite a few watch faces with complications so that you can display all the information, let's say your next calendar event, your battery life, the weather and whatnot, all on the watch face so that it makes it more glanceable. However, there are some really good watch faces that I've seen on the TicWatch Pro 3 that are not available, so it's a little bit of a toss-up, but honestly, the watch faces from Samsung are pretty good already. And I'm sure you can download third-party watch faces from the Google Play Store. So one of the biggest and most interesting features of the Galaxy Watch 4 is sleep tracking. Now, I have to say, it is very accurate, and I like the fact that you can choose what type of monitoring you want to have during the night. There are several options when it comes to choosing what type of monitoring you want in terms of your heart rate and your blood oxygen saturation, or your SpO2 for short. Now you can select every 10 minutes or constant heart rate tracking. Obviously the latter will consume more of your battery, but it will give you a more accurate read. I do recommend going with that. Now, for people who are very interested in the SpO2 or the blood oxygen saturation reading, I'm very happy to report that it's not like the TicWatch Pro 3, where the TicWatch Pro 3 could only take one sample every hour of your blood oxygen saturation, which honestly was quite useless and one of the biggest cons of the TicWatch Pro 3. With the Galaxy Watch 4, you get a lot more fine-grained detail. Now, one of the biggest caveats with the Samsung Galaxy Watch 4 is that it doesn't really operate very well with non-Samsung Android devices. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this video, because that is a major con to this smartwatch. When I paired this with, say, a Pixel device, I was not able to see all the detailed sleep results on my wrist or on the watch. I would have to open the app. It was a terrible experience, actually, to be honest. And what really sucks is that you don't get the snore detection feature. Now, I'm really going to talk about this later, but I think this is an utter shame that Samsung has artificially limited software features for those who don't have a Samsung phone. One new and really important health tracking feature is the body composition measurement, which can track your body fat percentage amongst other things. This is quite honestly a breakthrough feature, because having visibility into your body fat percentage is way more important than just seeing your weight. You see, you can actually lose body fat while still maintaining the same body weight if you, of course, replace that fat with muscle if you work out. In terms of accuracy, I have to say it's quite good when compared to other body composition scales, which can be very costly, if I may add. The only real issue I have with this body composition reading, besides the awkward stance and challenging finger placement that is required to take a reading, is that you can't easily change the user stats on the fly, which means there's no easy way for your friend or family member to measure their body composition if they have a different age or a different height. So let's talk about fitness tracking. Is the Galaxy Watch 4 finally able to compete with the likes of Fitbit or Garmin, which have fantastic fitness tracking, lots of detailed metrics, very good, monitoring of all your heart rate and all that stuff? Well, I have to say yes and no. Overall, for the basic activities like, running, biking and all that stuff, there's auto workout detection. There's all these hardware sensors like your GPS, your accelerometer. Yes, you're going to get an overall good fitness tracking experience. However, where it falls really short is in the strength training tracking, where it is a very weird setup on how it works. And I've seen this in previous Galaxy watches. So let me explain. Now, unfortunately, Wear OS has deprecated this feature in their recent Wear OS 2.0. You can no longer auto track your reps and your sets when you're doing your strength training regimen. The only last standing watch that does this pretty well is the Garmin series watch, the Vivo Active 4, the Venue 2S, which I have recently reviewed. I'll leave a link in the description for that. Garmin's implementation of auto rep strength training activity is absolutely amazing. It's one of the best. The crappy thing with the Galaxy Watch 4 or Samsung's design when it comes to strength training is that each type of exercise is considered an actual activity. So you see running, it's an activity, sure. And then you see strength training, you treat that as activity. And within strength training, you have, dumbbell presses, chest presses, all these types of different exercises, repetitive motions that you would typically do and would be auto-detected based on your rep count and all that stuff. Well, the funny thing with Samsung is they treat an individual exercise as an activity. So for example, a chest press is an activity. A push-up is a separate activity. So what ends up happening is that you have to press a lot of buttons on the watch to get through your workout. Let's say you go to the gym and you do chest press, you do crunches and all that stuff. You have to navigate between the menu, start and stop different activities repetitively. And this is just such a cumbersome, very bloated experience. It's just a terrible way of actually tracking your reps. Now, what's rather impressive is that it can detect your reps as you're doing the motion. So let's say you're in the activity of chest presses. You can do that chest press movement, and you'll see a little animation that shows you how to do it in case you don't know how to do it. And it can actually track every rep. And then once you hit your goal, let's say you did 10 reps, it will make that a set and then give you a 60-second break. You can customize that, and then you can repeat for the next set. So that is really cool. And I really wish that they could just streamline this so that it just auto detects every type of exercise you're doing, similar to what you typically would get on a Garmin fitness tracker. So overall, Wear OS, it doesn't have a strength training activity anymore. And Samsung's implementation is just horrid. It's just terrible and very cumbersome to use. So I'm really hoping that a third-party developer finally makes a really good strength training tracking app for the Google Play Store. So on to Bixby, or the voice assistant. Now, when I first heard the news that the Google Assistant wasn't coming on the launch day of Galaxy Watch 4, I was utterly shamed. I even didn't want to buy this watch, because after hearing that, I was like, this totally sucks. They're probably never going to push it, or if they do, it's going to be delayed, many years, let's say. And Samsung is always trying to push their own Bixby. Now, the thing is, I don't blame Samsung for doing this, because Google Assistant is not perfect. It doesn't fully work the way it should work. I think there are a lot of known issues and bugs in the Google developer company that they're aware of, and they just can't release this Google Assistant with the Samsung Galaxy Watch 4 if 20% of the features don't work properly. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a TicWatch Pro 3 and I use it daily. I use the Google Assistant and it works pretty much all the time. It's pretty good, but obviously things like sending a text message or navigating, trying to get Google Maps directions, things like that, sometimes they just don't work at all, or they just sometimes break intermittently. So it's a very shoddy experience, but honestly, the Google Assistant is so smart. It can control your home automation. Despite all those flaws, it's still the best thing we have. With Bixby, in the past, it's been really bad, but it has gotten better on the Galaxy Watch 4. The thing with Bixby is that you have a lot of hardware control thanks to Samsung's native integration with their apps and their phones, which means that if you have a Samsung phone, you're going to get the better experience. For example, you can send a text message if you use Samsung's messaging app, for example. But if you don't, if you have a Pixel, you're going to end up with a very crappy experience. And, Bixby is going to do what it does for any type of voice assistant, like set alarms, set reminders, which do work pretty well. And the voice detection is very accurate. So overall, Bixby is not as good as the Google Assistant. Even if Google Assistant doesn't work 20% of the time, it's still not as good. But it is a lot better than the previous generations from what I remember in the Watch 3 and the Watch 2. I'm just very glad we have any type of voice assistant on the Galaxy Watch 4. So now we're going to get into my real complaint. And this has to do with the display technology, battery life, and just day-to-day usage as a regular user. Now with the TicWatch Pro 3, we have this awesome dual display technology where when you're not using the watch or you're not actively engaged with it, you're going to have a low power display, kind of like a Timex watch where it shows like a transreflective screen. And what's really nice is that this is always on and you can see it in pretty much any type of lighting situation. It's great because it doesn't shine a light at night, so it doesn't bother you at night, and it consumes a lot less battery, so you always have the time. One of my biggest pet peeves with any type of smartwatch or fitness tracker that doesn't have a really good always on display is, one, if we do enable it, battery life is going to be significantly impacted to almost to the point where you don't want to wear this watch because you have to charge it every day and it's quite a cumbersome task to remove it from your wrist and yada yada yada. And the second thing is you have that lag, half second, maybe a second, every time you want to see the time. And one of the main reasons why we all wear a watch, smartwatch or whatever, a regular watch, is to tell the time. That is the primary feature of any smartwatch. And not having that work 100% like the way you expect it, maybe you're in a meeting and you want to quickly glance at the corner of your eye, the time, you can't do that. You have to make some awkward gesture. I just wish Samsung would adopt the dual display technology, because we all know that the battery life for always on displays that use OLED technology just drain the battery way too much. So let's talk about Android phone support. Let me just say honestly, if you don't have a Samsung phone, do not buy the Galaxy Watch 4. Despite how good it is and how, there's obviously some flaws, there's just way too many compromises if you don't have a Samsung phone. So many features are artificially cut out just because you don't have a Samsung phone, and I think it's an utter shame that Samsung has done this just to promote their own type of products. This is definitely not a Google Wear OS watch first. It is Samsung's Tizen Wear OS just laid on top of Wear OS, and in the end, if you don't have a Samsung phone, do not buy the Galaxy Watch 4. So to summarize this video, I think the Galaxy Watch 4 is a beautiful, thin, sleek watch that is very powerful, built on the 5nm process. And I really love the display and everything, but I think not having that dual display technology or a truly long multi-day battery life with always on display. Lastly, the lack of support for non-Samsung phones, the lack of Google Assistant, which I'm very not confident that they're going to release in the future, we are still not at the point of the perfect Wear OS watch where it satisfies mostly everything that we wanted here. So that's it for my review of the Galaxy Watch 4. If you agree with any of the comments or disagree, please let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, please do give a like and definitely subscribe for more wearable content. I will see you in the next video.